Hello everybody, and welcome back to The Conversation. Recently I had to take a trip up to northern Germany to the city of Hamburg, and I was riding on a bullet train with 5.5 hours of time to spare. So what did I do? Well, of course I pulled out my laptop and I started looking at episode 2 of Young Royals and started putting together my notes. And this video is the result of those notes. Let me know how you enjoy it. Episode 2 had a really interesting beginning, in my opinion. And you already know that I think very highly of the screenwriters. And I think if I could look at the notes that the screenwriters had written, I think I would title this episode Perceptions, because I really think that that's what it's all about. And it opens up in such a good way. If you'll remember at the end of episode 1, they had a little party, well, maybe more than a little party, but they had a party, and then certain people broke off from the party and went off into the woods together, and who knows what happens in the woods on a dark night in northern Sweden. So when everybody gets back to their houses the next day, the guys and the girls separately have this ritual where they have somebody stand up on a chair and recount, I guess, the details of their sexual experiences from the night before. It's interesting that both the girls and the guys' houses do this. It goes back to this idea that the young women and the young men in this series, if not Sweden, are treated as equals and are looked at equally. So both have their sexual needs and their sexual sides. So this particular encounter is really interesting to me because we have Madison, who gets up on the chair in the female dorm, and she recounts the incident that she had with Niels, who gets on the chair in his house and recounts this episode. And it's fascinating to me that both of them have completely different perceptions of the same incident. Madison can barely remember Niels' name, thinks that he's in the third grade, he's a third year. There we go, he's a third year. And she said he kind of just pulled it out and, there it was. And at the end of the day, it was really boring and hopefully won't happen again. Whereas Niels recounted that she was really into it. He'd give the encounter a 9 out of 10, and they're all but dating at this point. It's all but official. Fascinating because, as most of you who've seen the series already know, Neil is actually not all that interested in girls. And he's putting this perception out there that he's interested in girls and he's pursuing girls. And I'll talk about that whole conversation much later in a much later video. But for the moment, we all know that I can't remember if he's bisexual or gay. I'm standing in the middle of the gardens of a castle or a palace, so I don't have time to look it up at the moment. But he's either bi or he's gay, and he's putting on a front. He chooses to be in the closet and obviously he gives an embellished story. I think this is interesting in contrast to how Wilhelm is pursuing Simon. If you look back or remember back to episode 1, Wilhelm was the one that initiated contact with Simon when he introduced himself at the table. In episode 2, there is a scene that I'll talk about in detail next, where Wilhelm is going out of his way to try to talk to Simon. He's looking for an excuse to have a conversation. And then, of course, there's the scene at the end of the episode in which they're sitting together in movie night, and Wilhelm puts his hand on his own knee, but of course brushes the knee of Simon, giving Simon the green light that, hey, I'm interested. In case you missed any other signal, I'm interested. As far as the movie night, I'm going to talk about that scene also separately. I just wanted to get this initial scene out of the way because I thought this was really well done, where the seeds were put out there. Speaking of things that we learned much later in the season, we find out that one of these young ladies in the class, and forgive me, I just don't know her name off the top of my head, but I'll put it at the bottom of the screen, her character's name. There's this one young lady who is definitely in love with this other young lady and never tells her friend how she feels. In this episode, in the beginning, they have a conversation. Now they're talking about August and how people can change, whatever. But this one girl gets upset with the other girl's opinion and walks away. She gets very emotional, and the other young lady doesn't understand why. Looking to the end of the series, we know why. And if we go to that movie night I was just talking about with Wilhelm, we see that they are, you know, sitting very intimately with one another. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious when you look back. And once again, I think the details were put there for us, so it wasn't that much of a reveal at the end of the season. All right, when I was reviewing episode 1, you'll remember that I specifically did not go into a character evaluation about Simon. I felt much more comfortable doing it in episode 2. Good reason for it. Let me give it to you. I think that Simon is a bit misleading because he comes off as a little bit passive. He seems like a little bit quiet. If you'll remember in that first episode when he was with the choir and he was singing, he was timid at first, and then his backbone kind of straightened and he belted out and did what he needed to do. And I think that that really sums up who Simon is as a person, as a character, and I think it plays out better in episode 2. In this episode, we realize that Simon wants something better from life. He wants more from life. If we look to the scene that I think is so important, in which the students are in the classroom and they're receiving the results of their math tests, we see that Simon is surprised that while he passed his test, he didn't get the grades he's normally accustomed to getting. And his sister explains, well, our last school, the grade point average was a little bit lower than it is here, so you got to expect a higher standard. It's going to be a little tougher. But Wilhelm sees his opportunity to not only re-engage Simon in conversation, but he uses it as an opportunity to help Simon. And he gives him the hint that, hey, this is how it really works behind the scenes. These other guys are getting, and girls, are getting better grades because they're paying for private tutoring lessons. That's how the good old boy system works. So again, Wilhelm's not only using this as an opportunity to connect with Simon, but he's actually helping Simon take a step up to be equal with everyone else. And I think that says a lot about Wilhelm as well. I think Wilhelm has a rather egalitarian view of society. I think he wants to see people come up. And there's the key, because Simon wants to come up. Now, Simon could have taken this advice and just moved on with his life and you know, done nothing with that advice. But instead, he acts on that advice. He goes to his teacher after class and he talks about getting tutoring lessons, even though, quite frankly, he doesn't know where he's going to get the money for it. What's important here about Simon is we see that when Simon wants something, he's going to act on it. He's not going to sit passively by. And I really love that about him. He's just not the passive choir boy that we first saw. But in truth, there is a real tiger inside of him, a lion that's willing to go out. Now, we also see this because he wants to be part of that upper class. We see him participating or trying to participate in the sport of rowing. I personally know nothing about rowing. Surprising when you consider where I come from, but I know nothing about rowing. But Simon takes a stab at it on his own time. He's out there, and what do we see Wilhelm do? He goes over there and starts giving him tips about how to be a better rower. He's trying to help him up into that upper class. And of course, August comes along and ruins it with, you know, insulting remarks. But the point is, Simon wants to be in that upper class, and he's going to act on it. He's going to do what he has to do to get there. There's another scene where Simon is explaining to his personal friends, and I happen to like his personal friends. I think I could hang out with them. They seem to be very down-to-earth people. But he explains to Rocher and Ayub, he says, you know, I don't want to spend my whole life in this small town. I mean, I like it here, but I want more out of life. And they don't understand that. And Simon's kind of disappointed that they don't understand that. But Simon knows what he wants out of life. He has a very, I think he has a very clear idea of what he wants, and he's willing to sacrifice to get there. Now, as of yet, I don't know what it is he ultimately wants. And I'm looking at the clues, and I don't have a clear picture yet. But I bet in season 3 we're going to find out. I have to talk about August, and of course I'm going to talk about how much I can't stand him. But I think that that is a credit to the actor, because every interview I've seen with this actor and things I've heard other actors say about this actor, he is just a really nice guy behind the scenes, and it's so at odds with the jerk that we see on the screen. So kudos to the actor. All right, what I need to say about August is, you'll remember from the first review when we talked about his character, I said that he's a schmoozer. I said that he's a manipulator. And I think he's probably sociopathic because of the way he raises his eyebrows and leans into conversations. I also really didn't like the fact that he's constantly touching Wilhelm's face or touching his shoulder or putting himself. Okay, well, you know, in episode 2, we just got more of the same. But he took it a step further, and it really ticked me off because I think August, not only does he need to learn to be a human being, but he needs to learn to knock on doors before opening them. In fact, wait to be invited before opening them. There were 2 separate incidents where he just opens the door and walks into Wilhelm's room, and that really irritated me because that's something that personally peeves me. That's a quick way to get me irritated. But notice that on the second time he opened the door and just walked in, he thought that he had interrupted Wilhelm masturbating. Now, we were, of course, in the room before he opened the door, so we know that that's not what he was doing. But believing that Wilhelm was masturbating, August walked in the room anyways. I mean, what a massive invasion of somebody's personal space. This guy has no respect for personal boundaries. People are just tools to him. That just irritates the heck out of me. But it also makes me wonder. I mean, I've accidentally walked, when I was in the military, I accidentally walked in on people that I think that that's what they were doing. And my immediate response was, excuse me, I turn and walk away because I don't want to be in their personal space while they're doing that. I don't mind giving people their privacy. Makes me wonder why August can't do the same. Of course, he's sociopathic. That's why. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the scene where August is walking next to Felice, and the first thing he does is wrap his arm right around her and leans right into her personal space uninvited. I can't speak for Sweden or Swedish society because I don't really have that much experience with Sweden. But here in Germany, you cannot just walk up to somebody and put your arm around them. You cannot just walk up to a woman and put your arm around them unless you are a family member or in a relationship with that person. So again, this guy just has no respect for personal space, and it just irritates me. But it's because of August, I ended up in a really interesting conversation in the comments section of our channel. I was kind of confused because there's a scene where the headmistress comes and tells August that his tuition hasn't been paid and that he's at risk of, being asked to leave the school. And I also thought that because of that there was tuition in the school that had to be paid, and therefore Simon, who can't afford it, he can't afford the tutoring lessons, let alone the tuition. He must have been on scholarship at the school. But I'm going to kill these names. But OZ in the comments section and Scrolle corrected me on that. They told me that I was wrong, that Simon is absolutely allowed to go to that school because all tuition in Sweden is free. And I challenged them on that. They challenged me back, and I went and did the research that they sent me to go look at, and sure enough, they are completely correct. I was fascinated to learn that private schools and public schools in Sweden do not charge tuition. Neither one of them do. And that's because quality education is guaranteed to every child. And so private schools are actually subsidized by the government. Now, the fact that August is paying tuition is because he's a boarder. So it's not just that he's getting education, but he's staying there. He's taking his meals there. He's sleeping in a room. So that's what he's paying for. So Simon and Sarah both are completely allowed to attend this school for free. And I found that utterly fascinating. So I actually looked it up where I live in Germany to see what the rules were here. And believe it or not, it's also true. Quality education is guaranteed to all students. Therefore, private schools and public schools are accessible to everyone. And in Germany, private schools are also subsidized by tax money. Some private schools are allowed to charge an additional tuition for, extras. I'm losing the word at the moment, but for the extras. But that the tuition is capped in most states. But some states, like NRV, North Rhine-Westphalia, they actually mandate that the private schools cannot charge any extra tuition. So anybody's allowed to go to those schools for free. The way that these private schools get around just having everybody and their brother come in is they have a set number of places, and they're allowed to choose who gets those places. So somebody like Simon and Sarah can go to the administration of Hillerska and say, hey, we had a problem in our last school for whatever reason, and we think this is a better fit for us. And yes, this school is out in the countryside, and it's a little more difficult for our children to get to, but that's where we want our kids to go, and they were allowed to do it. I did not know that. Let me say one other thing that I found fascinating about German law in particular. In Germany, homeschooling is illegal. And the German courts have ruled that a child's right to a quality education outweighs the parents' desire to keep their children at home. I find that particularly fascinating because coming from the United States, where there is a trend in homeschooling, I definitely have some strong thoughts about homeschooling. I'm going to leave it. It's fair. I just leave it right there, Gus. Okay, I'm just going to leave that thought right there. If you ever come to my living room and share coffee or wine with me while we sit around and talk about these things, I'll be happy to share my opinion. But for now, I'm going to keep it to myself. And that brings us to the final scene that we had where everybody met together in the manor house for movie night. Now, please notice that the two young ladies I was talking about earlier are cozy with one another off to the side. But what's most important here, I think, of course, and what we're all looking for is the fact that Wilhelm put his hand on his own knee and in doing so brushed the knee of Simon, giving the signal. Simon didn't miss that signal, and he puts his own hand over Wilhelm's. And at that point, Wilhelm smiles. I think he's truly pleased that Simon feels the same way back. And he's good with the situation until Sarah notices that they're holding hands. Now, the fact that Wilhelm initiated this contact and did it in a room full of people tells me that Wilhelm's not embarrassed about that part of the nature of their relationship. I think instead, at that moment, Wilhelm realized that there could be consequences behind this, and he's already made so many mistakes in his past that put him in conflict with the crown that he pulled his hand back and excused himself from the room because he needed to think about this. Simon follows him into the hallway, of course, and tentatively kisses Wilhelm. When Wilhelm doesn't protest, he leans in for a more intimate kiss. At that point, Wilhelm tries to break it up and he says, sorry, I'm not, but he doesn't finish the sentence. And what was he going to say? What do you think he was going to say? In the comment section below, I would really like to know what you think he was going to say. Was he going to say, sorry, I'm not like that? Sorry, I'm not interested in you like that? Well, I think that's ridiculous because he's the one that initiated it. I think more likely he was going to say something along the lines of, sorry, I'm not in a position to pursue this. Because again, I think the consequences are already playing into the back of his head. And of course, at the end of the scene, Wilhelm throws caution to the wind and leans in and kisses Simon the way Simon deserved to be kissed. I find that to be an interesting contrast to Niels, because Niels, as we know, is a closeted, self-closeted member of the LGBT community and not necessarily interested in girls like that, and yet he's putting on a show of being interested in Madison. Whereas Wilhelm is not putting on a show for anybody. He likes who he likes, he makes no apologies for it, and I think he's comfortable with it. The only problem for him is the consequences that will come when he has to butt heads with the crown. Therein lies the problem. So that's my review of episode 2. I am very interested to know what you think. I'd like to know what you thought Wilhelm was going to say. I'm interested to hear about what you had to say about some of the thoughts I had when I viewed this. Maybe you saw some things I didn't. As ever, I'm really looking forward to the conversation in the comments section. And if it's possible for you to do so, I would really be interested to see where people are viewing these videos from. And I mean, we're young royals, not necessarily my reviews, but young royals. So if possible, in your comment section, would you put your flag of the country you're in or write it out or something? Because I'm interested in seeing that. So until next time, my friends, I promise there will be another episode of this because I'm quite frankly enjoying what I'm doing. I hope you're enjoying it as well. Love the comments. Please keep them coming. So until next time, my friends, be safe, be smart. Tschüss.